I'm not saying that being in a hotel is detrimental to my health, but I just watched Pierce Brosnan save Linda Hamilton from a volcano. Alrighty, here we are again. Here we are again, friends and family. We're back with another Q&A, and I want to say thank you to everybody who sent in the questions. I am one person with one opinion. I've had this weird career around this stuff, so I have a very distinctive opinion about a lot of these things and a lot of these answers to the questions that you're asking. Sorry. And so, but I'm one person with one opinion. If you don't agree, that's totally fine. Don't worry about it. The purpose of this exercise is not for you to agree with everything I say. It's just for me to share the opinions that I've made through 35 years of being around the photography industry and 11 years of being around the self-publishing industry. And maybe old Dano here's got a little info for you that might work. And yeah, let's get started. I'm still in Seattle. It's raining. It's still raining, I should say. This is the second film of the day. And it was raining when I started the first one, and it's still raining now. And I've got about 20 devices charging in this room right now after being in the van for 10 days. And the hotel's probably wondering where all their energy's going. It's going to me and my stuff so that I can do this for you. Oh, we are getting close to Halloween. Like it? First question is about video learning style, if I have any advice. Now, for those of you out there who were thinking, why on earth would you ask Dan Milnor how to make a film? You've got a good question. You've got a good point on your hands. But if you're my age with a similar background and you're on the fence about whether or not you want to do this, then I might be the perfect person to ask, and that's the way that I'm going to treat this question. Yes, if you're on the fence about doing motion and video, yes, 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 all caps, do it, learn it, start now. Start with stills and audio, forget the motion. Just do stills and audio. It's probably the single most powerful thing you can create, even more so than motion. But it is a different language, and that's the fun part. If you speak Spanish and English, why not learn French? Because you're going to open up another third of the world to your language ability, and I feel like motion is the same thing. With still photography, you have got to nail it in the field. You've got to get whatever it is you need in the field. And yes, with motion, you want the best content you can possibly get, but you're casting a net of content that's so much wider than working as a still photographer, and the beauty and the art of filmmaking happens in the editing bay. That is my experience, my limited experience. You need your A-roll, B-roll, C-roll. I am filming all the time. I'm using my phone. I'm using a GoPro, a 360, a Sony, a Fuji. I'm writing every day. I'm recording sound because I have to have that kind of stuff. And I'm only on the hook for 2 films a week. I'm on the hook for a 60-second film a week and a long film a week that connects to that 60-second with a longer breakdown of the concept. That doesn't include all the writing I'm doing for Blurb. That doesn't include the meetings. That doesn't include the docs, the writing, the blogging, all the other things that I do for Blurb. I'm here meeting with Blurb and parent company executives this week and next. I have a lot of work outside of this. The role of filmmaking in my life is maybe 10% of what I'm doing now, which is probably surprising to some of you that might think I'm sitting around doing YouTube films all the time. I'm not. I have a full-time job, and this is a little sliver of that. Now, I'm hoping with some of the pieces that are working outside the Blurb board right now, that as I mentioned in the first film today, I'm hoping to connect some dots right now because I've been approached by several other organizations in the past week about doing work for them in a similar fashion and then merging all these things together. That's what I'm working on now, and it could be very exciting for me because I could then suddenly be doing this somewhat full-time, and I just need like a production studio. That's all I need. So, you know, nothing major, just a production studio. How hard can that be? I use Adobe Premiere, and the reason I use Adobe Premiere is that we have an association with Adobe. So I get Creative Suite, and I use Photoshop, Premiere, InDesign, I use After Effects. I use all the Adobe products. I love them. I think Adobe has done wonders in the creative world. But I also know that they can be expensive to a lot of folks, and also people sort of are rubbed the wrong way from time to time by the subscription model. And I do know that there are applications like Final Cut, which are perhaps a little easier to use. And now we have other things, DaVinci Resolve. You've got other options out there. The software, to me, any piece of software that's a good piece of software is something you do not have to think about. The Blurb Bookright software does not get in my way when I'm making a book. All it is it facilitates my idea, and that's all I'm asking from it. So I think all of these software options are good. The basic gist of this message, though, is if you're on the fence about being a filmmaker or starting to learn this discipline, this language, my advice is to start today. Who cares about making something great? Who cares about sharing it online? Just enjoy the process, and at least that way you will come to it with the right perspective. Question number 2. This was a question someone wrote me about double exposures and about how it was a new approach for me, and was I in fact asking the viewer to do more by showing them double exposures? And the short answer to that is yes. But remember, I have to tell you again, I think, because it's important, as to why I started doing double exposures. I am not known as a double exposure photographer. A lot of times when you're working in photography, the people in positions of power will tend to put you in a drop-down menu. After they've met you, they've seen your work. You have to be very careful about this. They will meet you, see your work, and then you are suddenly in their file menu. Dan Milnor, go to file menu. Black and white, long form, documentary photographer. Great. And yes, I love doing that work. It's probably the work I like to do the most, but does that totally define me? No, it doesn't. So double exposures come along, and yes, I'm doing it. I'm asking people to do more, but remember, I did it because of my trip to Albania. When I decided to go to Albania to take a workshop, I did my research on the country. And let me repeat that for those of you out there who have an aversion to this, who are too pampered to understand what this means. And yes, I know that's a little tough love, but you need to hear it. Doing research on a documentary project is the ground floor. It is the foundation, and there is no way around it, and there are no excuses around it. I've heard people use all kinds of BS excuses like, oh, I don't want to taint my point of view. So, and taint is such a great word because it has so many alternative meanings, if you know what I mean. I don't want to taint my opinion of the country, so I'm not going to do any research. It's lazy and it's fake and phony, and somebody needs to tell you that because you have got to do the research. So I did. I don't speak Albanian because I didn't have time to learn it before I went, but that's the thing, to me, the glaring omission in my preparation. But I was with people who were translators who could translate if I needed it. But I researched the country and then came up with a technique that I thought would best represent that situation, the 50 years of isolation and now the modern, burgeoning, young democracy. And double exposure to me was a way of representing both of those things, putting it together with good copy and good sound, and maybe having a project on my hands. So that's how double exposures came to be. I didn't just randomly stumble into this, shoot a bunch of random photos, and then try to assign meaning to them after the fact. And that is what I see happening on YouTube all the time. Random, disconnected, unattached photographs that people wander around, shoot in a very short amount of time, and then lo and behold, they come back and fabricate some sort of narrative or importance to these images. Now, if you want to do that, there's no law against that. I'm not, whatever. But that's not how I work. That's not how any of the photographers that I knew and respected when I was coming up, that none of them work that way. Everyone starts with the concept, the idea, the story. Number one is you have got to understand how to tell a story, both with pictures and with copy, and the merger of the two. You understand story, and then you do your research, and then you go do the work, and then you start editing and sequencing and packaging to deliver it as the point of the spear, the most poignant, powerful way you can possibly do that. And for me in Albania, it was double exposures. My intention was to go back this year and continue that project. It got bumped because of COVID, but we're aiming for spring of 2022. And you bet your ass I will be back there with my Fuji X-T2 and my Chinese 50mm, and I'll be banging out double exposures. And oh, by the way, I just found out that my X-T4 will shoot up to 9 exposures on one frame. Thank you, Brandon, for telling me about the camera that I had in my hand for over a year and didn't know about. So yes, believe it or not, that's where we're at. Without the help of friends, where would I be? Let's take a survey. A, jail. B, therapy. C, I don't know, jail again? Probably. Okay, question number 3. Oh, this is a good one. I think this is from Carl, not sure. For your next Q&A, help me, Dan. My digital asset management, my DAM, is a damn mess. I like that, Carl. Play on words. Give yourself a gold star. I've got photos going back 20 years spread across several computer hard drives, external HD, my current phone, old phone, iPad, Google Photos. Yeah, it's a mess. I hear you. I wish I'd heard your advice about maintaining an archive many years ago. I need to centralize, then organize my archive. Is there any software that'll help, and do you have any books to recommend? I have a secret weapon that you don't know about, and his name is Peter Crow. You didn't know I could sing, did you? Peter Crow, and it's K-R-O-G-H or K-R-O-U-G-H. Peter wrote the digital asset management book, the damn book, and it's way better than anything I'll be able to do in my life or would be capable of doing in my life. Peter's awesome. He's a photographer. He's also a tech geek, and he knows about archiving. So I read, the only technical book I've read in my entire adult life is the damn book. Now, I don't do everything that Peter does because he's way better at it than me and he's way more committed than me. So I cherry-picked from that book to devise a system that works for me. And you should do the same. But my advice to you is to start today. There's no procrastination. Develop a system, keep it simple, start today, and do not deviate. And the damn book will put you on that path. Now, I have another friend who teaches metadata and taxonomy, and he no longer uses hard drives at all. He uses PhotoShelter Pro as his daily sort of nerve center. That's unlimited storage and also a great distribution tool. And then he uses Backblaze B2 as an archive, as a backup. And then he uses Amazon Glacier as his end of days, cold storage. The world is ending. The Wanda Fuca plate decides to raise its hand this afternoon, and Seattle goes whoop, whoop, and is gone. That's where his work is going to live and survive. And so he's using PhotoShelter on a daily. The Backblaze is the general backup. I believe they're in Oregon. And then Amazon Glacier is a way for you to choose the servers in the world, and the backups are where they are. You could conceivably choose Northern Ireland. You could choose Washington, D.C., and you could choose India. And then you've got redundancy in your servers. You have to pay to retrieve that work, but you're not retrieving it because you're using Backblaze and PhotoShelter in the interim. Now that might be, my guess is for a lot of you, that's a little bit overkill. But what I've found that's interesting is that everyone lies about this. The camera companies, the brands, photographers, and if anyone tells you that this is easy, inexpensive, or no issue, they are lying to you. And odds are the more confident they are, the worse their system is. That has been my experience. When I run into someone that says, well, I've got a system, but boy, it requires constant maintenance and it's something I really think about and have to pay for, then I'm like, okay, I want to hear what this person has to say. When I hear people say it's no big deal and they talk about just, quote, putting it in the cloud, and then I tell them, well, how do I get 75 terabytes in the cloud? And their response is, that's impossible. There's no way you have 75 terabytes. Then I realized they don't understand what being a photographer was. They don't understand the volume of work that someone will create and need to save because, and I'm going to remind you again, here comes the tough love. The tough love is if you're not building an archive, what the hell are you doing? Putting it on Facebook, as we all know, Senate hearings today with Facebook. If you're still using Facebook, you should be ashamed of yourself, or Instagram, shame on you. You're part of the problem. And I am too, in a variety of other ways. So don't think I'm not pointing the fingers at myself. I am, but I walked away from those two horrible devices many, many years ago. An archive is essential for survival if you're talking about a career in photography. Your goal is to build work that has value over time. And that means that when you're 65 or 70 years old, you're still selling work from your archive, and in great part, that is assisting you in the later years in your life. If you don't think that's real and you don't know that that's happening, then you are not part of the industry. You don't even know this exists. And that's entirely possible because, again, today you can exist in the online world and you don't need to associate with the professional photography industry, and that's totally fine too. But the archive is an essential part. And so having an organized archive. Once this week, I heard someone reference FileMaker Pro as a archiving software. FileMaker Pro has been around. They literally invented FileMaker Pro the day the Egyptian pyramids were finished. That's how old it is. And it's still here, and it still works, and people are still using it. It's like the PDF. It's unbelievable. It's been around forever. FileMaker is great. Getting a good archiving software is not easy these days because a lot of image manipulation programs they don't double as archiving programs like they once did. And so it's hard to get a piece of software that's going to do that. But start with digital asset management. And Peter updates that book like every year. So if you're buying a digital version of that book, you're going to get the latest version. So I would start there and just take a tranquilizer, calm down, and realize that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And by the way, if you're shooting JPEGs, stop. And if you're shooting JPEGs and only saving the 1 or 2 images that you're going to put on Instagram, stop. Or actually, don't stop. Because you'll never be of consequence in the industry. You won't. You could be a gangbuster on Instagram. You could be a superstar. You could be the guy in the sleeveless shirt and the headband that everyone's like going to the bowling alley to get an autograph from 60 years from now. That's possible too. I've been to those autograph shows in the Valley in Los Angeles where celebrities from like the 60s, 70s, and 80s go to sell an autograph for 20 bucks. It's really scary and kind of sad. And although it's hard to say sad. That's too much of a blanket statement. There were some sad characters in there, but then there were people that you kind of looked at and like they would have been in like one episode of the show in the 1950s, and there were 500 people in line to get an autograph for them, and I'm like mystified, standing in the side going, "Are you serious? You drove across country to get an autograph from someone who was in one episode of a show in the 1950s? I'm baffled. Please explain." And then they would explain, and I'd walk away even more baffled than I was before. Who'da thunk it? Question number 4, if I can find it. And I even highlighted it, and I'm still having trouble. Old people and technology. Okay. Maintaining an archive. Okay. What, if you're entirely analog in your photography and are making silver gelatin prints, what's the best way to interact with Blurb to make a book? Easy. It's what we did before the digital revolution. Everybody was analog. You scanned. You either scan a negative or you scan a print. Most of the time, scanning negs. Scan an egg, your workflow then becomes the same as anybody in the digital workflow. So the same thing is true now. If I shoot a roll of film, I ship to LA, it goes to Richard Photo Lab or Photo Impact, they scan the roll of film, they put it on an FTP server, I download it, and that goes into my digital workflow, and now it's just like I captured with a digital camera. I drag those scans into Blur Bookride, and I'm on my way to making a book. Or I drag them into Adobe InDesign, on my way to making a book. The same is true. You can scan the prints, you could photograph, you could take a DSLR or mirrorless on a copy stand, copy your negs, copy your prints, and then put those into a book. It's very simple, and I encourage you to do that because obviously I spent the last 11 years of my life immersed in the Blurb culture, but I was in the print culture from 1988 to 2010 before I even found Blurb. And all I can say is it makes you a better photographer, and an understanding of print comes with a level of respect that transcends anything in the digital space. I will just leave it at that, and I've had that same conversation multiple times in the past week, and if you don't believe me, I don't care. It'll make no difference to me. That was my Italian accent, which is, from what I understand, spot on. Number 5. Try not to abuse the email function. That's okay. You can email me whatever you want. Before I get hung up at the house, I really need to figure out the whys and whats. But when I try to shoot video on the Fuji during the day, I usually can't see anything on the screen. Not a request for a tutorial, just wondering if there's something I'm doing that's wrong, or do you always use a tripod? The screen on these cameras, which I've mentioned to you, is so difficult to not stare at when I should be staring at the lens, but I always find myself staring here, and then it looks like I'm distracted and looking off, and I am distracted and probably am looking off, but yeah, I should be looking at the lens. These screens outside suck on every camera. So you have an option. You can get a little hood for these screens. I think I just bought a small rig cage for this Sony A7C, and I think they make little hoods, but there's a Hoodman, I think, makes a hood as well. And they're little hoods that slide over these screens to give you a little shade that make them easier to see outside. Having said that, if this is a full-time gig for you and something that you're serious about, you may want to invest in something like an Atomos Ninja, which is a screen about this big that is incredibly bright, incredibly sharp. It's also a recording device that attaches into the hot shoe and gives you a much easier, better way of viewing what you're filming during the day. You can also get hoods for those. You'll probably have seen a lot of DSLR rigs or mirrorless rigs with a handle on top, the camera down below, and then an Atomos Ninja on the top that you can then film and see. I have a Ninja. I find it a little bit bulky, a little cumbersome, a little heavy. The battery is massive, but for what it's designed for, it is a million times better than any screen built into a camera that I've seen. So that's an option for you. And in terms of the tripod, yes, historically I hated the tripod. With still photography, I never wanted to use a tripod. I always felt locked down and I never liked it, and I hardly ever used a tripod. But with video, I use it every day because you simply have so much stuff that needs to be steady. There's no way around it. I do not want to carry and charge and balance a gimbal on and off all day long every day, and it looks obnoxious when you're using a gimbal. So what I do is I use tripod shots, and then when I do handheld, it's with a very small rig, and the Sony A7 has a gyroscopic stabilization system built in that then runs through a piece of software that's free from Sony that will balance my clips. There's a slight crop to it, but I can live with that because I'm shooting a 20mm most of the time. And that will balance those clips, and then I import them into Premiere and I use them. And the stabilization of the clips through that software is pretty fantastic. It's not perfect, but it's pretty fantastic. And as we all know, my films aren't perfect, so it's a marriage made in heaven, people. And that's what I would suggest. My friend Brian from Media Storm, one of the best filmmakers I know, when I saw him a couple of years ago at one of his workshops and I walked in the room, we hadn't seen each other for a couple of years, and he looked at me and he said, "Milner, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you can do this filmmaking on your own, but remember, it's a team sport." And I was like, how did he know I was thinking that? Because I actually was thinking that. And he said, stop trying to be Mr. Cinematic, put your camera on a tripod and use the rock shots. And his films are a hell of a lot better than mine. So I think if he's given that advice to you, to me, I'm giving it to you. It is pouring out there right now. I think I'll have my wife go bring the car around. Just kidding. Next question, 6. What's the biggest change in your photography today from 10 to 20 years ago? What improved and what didn't? That's 2 questions in one. What changed 20 years ago was the digital revolution. Was digital camera technology arrived on the scene. Now you might be thinking, for you YouTubers out there, you might be thinking, yeah, that camera technology really changed everything. Not what you think. What it did change more than anything else was the perception of what a photographer did. And it did not change for the better. It started to erode the foundation of photography almost immediately. So everyone was analog before that. Suddenly everyone is going digital. The cameras were okay. They were, for the time, obviously decent. They were revolutionary. They were life-changing. Everyone was like, wow, this is going to change everything. But the key ingredient of what changed was the perception a client had and the general public had towards the photographer and what they were doing. I saw it firsthand. I was working for Kodak in 1997 when these cameras first arrived on the scene. I saw clients just devolve overnight. I was in a studio in Manhattan Beach watching a catalog photographer who was a decade ahead of his time, who was one of the first people I know to shoot tethered, who built a separate viewing room for the client. He would shoot in the studio tethered, and the images would pop up on a giant flat screen on the wall. And people were like, wow, we've never seen this. This is amazing. And at the end of the shoot on the first day, when the client had everything they needed before they walked out of the studio, which was the first time that had ever happened, there was no film and processing, there was no time lag. The client said, why am I paying you so much? And he said, you're paying me because of 30 years of experience. I took a chance and invested in the technology. I built this room, and I'm giving you an immediacy you've never had. That's why you're paying me. And the client said, I want to renegotiate. And I went back to my boss at Kodak and I said, if we don't get a handle on this and the photographers don't start getting together and making decisions on this, they're going to erode their own industry. And then that's what happened. Photographers didn't get together. They started giving digital away for less than, because there was no film and processing, and the industry began to erode. Now we have an erosion of the stock industry, the value of photography, assignment times are down, budgets are down. All of that is because of the beginnings of the digital revolution, which brought this decay. And I know that's contrary to what you're going to hear, but I have nothing to sell you. I'm not trying to sell you on being a professional photographer. I'm not selling you on technology. I'm telling you what happened. 10 years ago, what changed is I quit. Thankfully, I quit working as a photographer. Now, I quit the first time in 1997. I should have stayed quit, but my ego and my insecurity and some opportunities that popped up made me go back to being a photographer. So I worked again. So I worked from 88 to 97 as a photographer, quit for 4 years, and then worked from basically 2001 to 2010 when I quit for real. Quitting was the best thing I could have done. Detaching myself from photography, from my ego, from my insecurity, from the crazy notion that anyone else cared about this stuff. I should have done it decades before. And that was a liberating thing. It also made me realize that I was a pretty boring individual because I wasn't well-rounded. I knew a lot about photography. I knew how to make a good picture. I knew how to navigate the business of photography, but no one cared, and I really wasn't very interesting. I started to read. I deleted social media. I started to read and educate myself about topics, and I became probably a more interesting guy. There were times where I felt like the smartest guy in the room, and believe me, I'm not. But when everybody is obsessed by their phone and idiotic notions of validation from strangers on their phone, it's disheartening and it's boring, and you move away from those people, and I did not want to be one of those people. So those were the changes. The style of photography that I'm doing has also changed. It will never probably go back to what I was doing before because I simply do not have time. I mentioned earlier the kind of schedule I'm on, the demands on my life, the demands from a personal side and a professional side are very high, and I just simply do not have time to invest like I did before. So the long-term projects are probably not going to happen. I would love for them to happen, but unless something serious changes, they are not going to happen. I just do not have the bandwidth and the time and the resources to leave for 6 weeks. Stuart Isaac in his interview said minimum 4 weeks. If you're going to even, and that's just the first trip. Let me repeat that. And you're going to hear this in the interview I did with him. He said minimum to do a project, minimum investment of time is 4 weeks. And that's just the first trip. Okay? And for you online people out there who are shooting and turning and burning and putting stuff online, and spending, day after day after day promoting sort of subpar work, I get it, because 4 weeks investment for a lot of people is terrifying. A lot of photographers think a 2-day shoot is a long-term project. I know because I've talked to them. Whereas the school that I came up in was 10 years was a long-term project. So culture's changed, society's changed, attention span has changed, commitment levels have changed, professionalism has changed, and not for the better. So take your time, slow down, do that. That's what's changed for me. I will add one other thing, and it's a positive thing. I bagged on conceptual art photographers for the bulk of my career because I'm an idiot and I didn't understand what was going on. I looked at a lot of conceptual photography and I said, this concept is good, but the work is not. These people just don't know how to shoot, and consequently, they turn to the art world because you can virtually do anything you want. And I was going to give an example that I can't give from the painting world, an example I absolutely love, but it's kind of gross, and so I'll skip it. But that was on me. That was my ignorance. I didn't understand conceptual art. I didn't understand conceptual photography. And now I have a little bit of an understanding of it, and I immediately have started incorporating it into my work. Because I think traditional classic narrative photography, like I did, is actually better now and more powerful with a little twist. And I think photography is better and stronger and more important as a small part of a large conversation instead of the conversation. Because photographers are known as geeks because they focus on the nuts and bolts and the cameras and all that nonsense. And when you get into the bigger, badder, greater world, they don't want to know about that. They don't care. The only people who care about that are other geeky photographers. And so conceptual art to me can take a traditional narrative style project and position it in a way that it impacts far more people in far more ways. And that is interesting and exciting. So that's also changed. Okay, question number 7, and we're getting close here to being terminado. What part of your daily life does your photography take? Do you always have a camera with you? And do you only plan your camera outings to shoot or something in between? I always have a camera, and I always have had a camera. Historically, for decades, it was a Leica M-series camera in a little satchel that I carried with me, and I shot all the time, every day, little snippy, snappy things here and there. And then when I was a journalist, I was carrying 2 cameras and zooms and the whole deal. I still carry a camera every day. Now, we have the phone in my pocket, yes, but I don't really consider that a camera. For me, and I know a lot of people do, it's fine. For me, it's just a separate thing, and I love it, but it's not something that I get excited about picking up and using. That is starting to change a little bit, but only through motion. because the camera in the phone, the motion camera in the iPhone is so good and so small and stabilized, and the mic is good that it sometimes saves me from having to getting out a, quote, real camera. That's advantageous. But these days, I carry the Sony a7C with me all the time in a Shimoda backpack, and I have Tenba backpacks in Atlas as well, and I've got my entire Fuji system is sitting right in front of me right there. That's ready to go as well. And I'm gonna take the Leica adapter and 50mm lens from the Fuji bag, which is no idea why it's in there right now, but it's gonna go back in the Sony bag, and that's what I carry on a daily basis. If I was left to my own devices, and I didn't have the demands on me that I do right now, I would have the Sony with the Leica 50 and my audio recorder in my notebook. That's what I would carry most of the time, because that's the kind of work that I like. I like finding a photo essay, a photo project, diving in with a single lens, and single body, single lens, a notebook for the copy, and an audio recorder, and that's what I like to do. But I cannot do that because, again, I've got demands. I work full-time for a company. I am in the marketing department. I am the evangelist, and I am the sole, I think really the sole content producer when it comes to visual content. We have other people that are doing copy, but I'm the sole creator for the entire brand. Now, they partner with outside people on social who are doing short films and stills and stuff like that, but from internally, I'm the only person in the company. Can you believe that? So, and I have a laptop that won't hold a charge, you know, and so it could be a lot better. But until something changes, I don't think photography will ever be a big part of my life again. And again, I wish it was in some ways, because I do have a project in California right now that I think is one of the best things I've ever done. And I think it's going to be a fantastic project when I'm done with it, but maybe I get to work on it twice a year. And it's remote, so it's twice a year, it's a long way to go, it's hard to get to, it's a physically demanding project in a very remote space, and I need luck as well to continue it. So I'm working on that. The idea that I had to potentially shift this back to something that I can do more often is, yesterday I'm in Seattle and I got a tour of one of the printers that does a lot of printing for Blurb here in the United States. Now, they print for a lot of other companies as well, companies I'm not going to mention, because one of the funny things that I love is when haters out there will come to me and they'll say, I'd use Blurb, but you know, the printing, you know, I only use this other company and their printing is amazing and blah, blah, blah. And I never say anything. Same company, same printers that's printing it. They're just wanting to hate on Blurb for whatever reason, or hate on me. That's been happening for 11 years. And I just love it, because when they say I use this company, but I don't like that company, and in my head I go, it's the exact same company, exact same printers, exact same facility. It's just you have decided that you like one company and not the other. But what I realized from going through there yesterday is I wish all of you could see the complexity, the human touch, and the technological touch required to make a single copy of a high-quality book. A personalized, individualized book, like at Blurb, print on demand, one book at a time. The human touch and the technological touch required to do that is simply astounding. It is so complicated and so time and labor intensive, it would absolutely blow your mind. And frankly, you would stop complaining about everything if you saw how complicated it was, because in your head you would say, I cannot believe that's what it takes to do this. So my thought was, as I'm watching a lay flat book go through and get compressed, and the time involved, 3.5 hours of compression and wait time to get a single copy of a lay flat book through. And in my head, I was like, I made a lay flat sample last year and I blew it because I got the book and it looked so good. But what I should have done is filmed the entire process of how I made the work that was in the book. Then I should have traveled back to the facility here and I should have followed my book from the second it came in as a digital file to all the way through every step of the process, all the way through till I am holding the book in my hand. So last night when I had dinner with the CEO, I said, I'm doing that. I'm going to take this California project that I'm doing. I'm going to start filming myself in the field, showing you how I made this work, showing you how these pictures came to be, showing you how the story and the narrative came to me, how I edited, how I sequenced, the page design, the typography, if I work with a designer or not, that whole relationship, then uploading, sending the file, going to the facility here, and following that book all the way through from start to finish, that to me is interesting. And to really do that well, to not fall on my face, that project has to be good. It has to be the best thing I've ever done. And so that requires time that I simply do not have right now. So if you're my boss and you're in a position of power and you're like, what do we want this MILNOR guy to do? Let MILNOR photograph. Yes, let him back in the field. Unleash him on the field of documentary photography. Now, how long are we talking here? Holy Jesus Cristo, that's 35 minutes. I think that is a great place to stop. Again, one person, one opinion. These are good questions, though. This was like a spicy version of this. I feel like I just had a good main course, and there's a dessert on the way, and maybe a little glass of port, because I'm 100 years old. What'd you think? You like that? Send your questions in. These are fun for me because it's just free form. You know, there's no specific, no one's telling me to do this. I can talk to you like you were sitting here. And I don't have a brand behind me on this. I don't have anyone telling me you can't say this or you can't say that, or stop referencing Pierce Brosnan films for crap's sake. I can't. He's dreamy. If I was going to come back as another man, by God, it would be Pierce Brosnan.